Hello everyone, and welcome to the Miss Pink Digital Podcast, home to everything digital marketing, brand building, and tech. And it's been a while. It's certainly been a while. I do have to say I have not kept up with the podcast this year as I would have liked to. Reason being is because this year I moved house and it was just so much busier than I thought it was going to be. It was a house that needed to be redecorated from scratch, a lot of DIY, all of which I'm not a DIY girly, and a lot of changes around work, and generally my day-to-day routine were completely flipped on their head. So honestly, probably not the best excuse in the world, but time just got away from me and I haven't dedicated as much time to the podcast as I would have liked to. That being said, we are back today and hopefully, fingers crossed, we are back for more episodes on a more regular basis. My house is finally at a point where I don't have to do something to it every day, and working is finally starting to not mellow out, but I'm trying to get a more regular routine. So hopefully now we can fit the podcast in on a more regular basis. So today's episode is all about Google Ads charity accounts, also known as Google Grants account. So it's a bit more of a niche episode. It won't necessarily appeal to a wider audience. It's only really going to appeal to anyone who owns a charity or runs a charity, I guess. I don't think owns is the right word. Runs a charity, runs a non-profit organization, any agencies, or anyone who kind of wants to do more freelance work and go into the charity world a bit more. But nonetheless, obviously, you don't have to have all of those attributes to qualify to listen to this episode. You still might be interested either way, but we're going to be talking about Google Grants accounts today. And those of you who don't know what Google Grants accounts are, they're basically Google Ads accounts for charities and nonprofit organizations, whereby Google gives you $10,000 USD in budget every month. So that's essentially free spend from Google, for lack of a better word. However, in order to qualify for this spend, not only do you have to be a charity or a nonprofit and fill out the forms for Google to decide whether you qualify for that, you also have to follow a number of rules within the account. So that can be quite a confusing area for charities and nonprofits, especially if they aren't that familiar with the Google Ads space, which is why I thought an episode kind of talking through the different policies you have to follow would be really helpful. Like I say, it's not going to appeal to everyone. It's probably not going to get loads of listens, but I think it will be helpful nonetheless. Back in my agency days, I definitely did manage my fair share of charity accounts. So I feel like I have quite a lot of experience around that area. And whenever I onboarded a new charity account, these were always the questions that came up. Whenever I audited a charity account, I always saw these problems, and I always ran into charity accounts being deactivated because they weren't familiar with these rules. They didn't really understand what they meant and therefore weren't following them. So let's just jump straight into it, I guess. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the overall setup of charity account campaigns. And then we're going to go into the management and the performance criteria that you kind of have to hit/follow in order for your account to remain active and not risk any suspensions. So when it comes to the campaign setup, Google does have a compliance guide, which I will try and link in the show notes as well for people if they want to read them. And the first thing in their compliance guide is no single keywords permitted. So what this basically means is within your campaigns and ad groups, you can't just feature keywords that are just one word, i.e., let's say you're a dog charity and you've set up a Google Ads account and you've got a new campaign. You couldn't have keywords in it such as dog. Simple as. So no single keywords within your charity account. There are exception keywords, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And Google does have a link to those as well. But yes, you can't have any keywords that are just one keyword in your ad group, except for keywords that fall under Google Ads exception list. And this confuses a lot of people because when they see the no single keywords rule, they seem to misunderstand this with things like no single keyword ad groups. You can still have single keyword ad groups. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's one keyword per ad group within a campaign. You can still have that. It just has to be more than one word within the keyword. Now, when it comes to your single keywords that you are allowed, like I say, Google does have an exception list, and in their compliance policy guide, they do link to that. So things like the word charity, donation, donate, nonprofits, homeless, homelessness, addiction, abuse, LGBT, LGBTQIA+, all of those kind of keywords in that list, you are allowed to use. However, one thing I would say, it would be quite a waste of your ads budget if you were to just use some of these single keywords that are in the list. Obviously, if they're not relevant to your charity, do not use them. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But for instance, things like charity, by targeting that keyword, yes, you might get a lot of clicks and a lot of impressions. You might not get any action off the back of clicks from that keyword, because charity, using that just as a single keyword, is such a broad term to use that no one's specifying the type of charity. You're not specifying what they want to do for the charity. So therefore, you could be generating a lot of irrelevant clicks there. So when going through the Google single keyword list, it's really important to make sure that you target the right single keywords. Another exception is your branded keywords. So if you run a charity or nonprofit and the name of that charity and nonprofit is a single keyword, then that is an exception as well. In terms of getting that exception allowed, if you have any issues around that, then I would recommend contacting Google directly just to ensure that they are aware that your account, those single keywords are your brand's name and you're not breaking any of the compliance policies, and they can ensure that you don't get any disapprovals or negative feedback regarding targeting your branded terms. And alongside single keywords, Google does not like when you target overly generic keywords within your grants account. Now, when it comes to regular Google Ads accounts, obviously, when you're paying your own budget, you can kind of target whatever keywords you like, providing they don't break Google's wider keyword policies, which for the most part, you wouldn't want to be bidding for those type of terms anyway. But when it comes to grants accounts, obviously because Google is giving you the money essentially to spend on your advertising, you really need to make sure that your keywords are not only relevant to your charity or nonprofit, but they also provide the users with a good user experience. And obviously, if you are targeting terms that are completely irrelevant to your business, that are too generic, that's not going to be providing the user with good experience. And the last thing Google wants is to be supplying an advertiser with its own money to go against what Google says they're all about, which is about the user's experience, and making sure that Google are placing the right ad with the right query for the user. Also, again, going back to the piece that I was talking about around click quality, when you go with keywords that are too generic to what you offer anyway, you're going to be generating those low quality clicks and wasting your ad budget on low quality traffic that doesn't end up turning into action. Now, I'm not saying you can't go for broader terms, especially if you're trying to drive awareness for your charity and nonprofit, but there is a difference between targeting the broader terms and reaching a larger audience who may not necessarily have you at the top of their mind, but now you're kind of in their thoughts and they're in your funnel, to targeting keywords that are just completely irrelevant and not going to help you at all. And that goes for paid accounts as well as charity accounts. There is a balance between driving that brand awareness, improving that reach through the broader targeting, but also generating clicks that are just not going to help your account. If you really want to broad out your targeting and you want to drive that awareness piece, then something I would recommend looking at is the match types you're using. If you're using a phrase match keywords, try testing and shifting over to broad match terms. That way you can still target relevant keywords that Google won't flag as too generic, but it allows you to get that reach for more search queries because you're using a broader match type rather than a more restricting, more controlled match type. Something else to note when it comes to charity accounts and nonprofit accounts, you cannot run Google Shopping. It is primarily search based. So what I used to do a lot with charity accounts, if they had their own merchandise or their own stores, which is quite common for charities nowadays to do that as an additional avenue for revenue every year, is that would be set up through a normal Google Ads account, which they would have to pay for. It's really important to make sure you know that. So if you are running a Google charity account, you are only doing search activity. You cannot do shopping. Shopping you will be paying for. So if you set up a shopping account, which is attached to Merchant Center and has shopping campaigns, just remember you will pay for that activity, not Google. I will also a bit later on talk about some important things to remember and keep in mind when setting up your grants account, because I've seen certain steps in the setup process go wrong. And because those steps weren't correctly followed, it meant that there were charities that were actually paying for their ad spend rather than Google because they didn't set up the account correctly. So we'll talk about that more in a bit, but let's continue back in with the policies. So this next one is all about keyword quality score. And those who don't know what keyword quality score is, keyword quality score is essentially a ranking assigned by Google to your keywords to tell you how helpful your keywords are to the user based on a few pieces of criteria. The first one is landing page experience, or well, these are in no particular order, but the first one is based on landing page experience, which is the experience the user has once they go from your ad to your landing page, so kind of in the name. The next one is ad relevance, so how relevant your ad is to your keyword. And then the final one is expected click-through rate. And in order for Google to kind of gain an idea of that expected click-through rate score, they go based on historical data. And if you don't have that historical data, then they also take into account other factors like your ad quality. Do you have all your headlines and descriptions implemented? Are they varied? Do they follow Google Ads best practices when it comes to ad copy? So it's a combination of historical data and the setup of your assets. So those things all factor together to feed into your keyword quality score. And Google Ads is very strict when it comes to keyword quality score within grant accounts because it feeds into that overall piece. If Google is giving you money, you need to use it wisely and ensure the user has a good experience. If your quality score is too low, it does indicate that your ad account is not providing the user with a good experience, and therefore Google shouldn't be giving you any ad spend. So the rule around quality score is Google does not like keywords with a quality score of 1 or 2. So quality scores go up to 10. Ideally, you need a quality. Well, you don't need, but ideally it's good to have a quality score as high as possible. So between 7 and 10, I like to say. It's obviously not possible in all instances, but the higher you can get that, the better. And if you have a quality score or keywords with a quality score below 2, then what I would recommend is either as a quick fix is pause them. So that generally tends to be the main solution to prevent any suspensions within your account. If they are keywords that tend to be working well and you get conversions off the back of them, so you don't want to pause them, but the quality score has dropped, then look at ways of how you can improve your ad relevance, your expected click-through rate, and your landing page experience. Within the Google Ads account, you can actually segment your keywords out by quality score so that you can customize your columns and add in a quality score, but also add in alongside quality score, landing page experience, expected click-through rate, and ad relevance. And then within each of those columns, it will tell you what keywords have a below average, average, or above average for each of those criteria points. And then based on that, you can work on optimizing those keywords if you feel is necessary. Obviously, general rule of thumb, it's important to always be optimizing towards your keyword quality score. So if you are doing that, then you shouldn't have an issue with this. But it's really important to make sure you're checking in on your keyword quality score as a regular optimization and looking for areas to consistently improve it. If the keywords don't seem to be improving in quality score, then it's just best to pause them and not optimize towards them altogether to prevent any form of suspension. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to do all of that. I don't have time to go and check my quality score every week, look at the tables, customize the columns and see what is causing the quality score to be low. Get that. So an option you do have is setting up an automated rule, which is essentially where you tell Google that you want to pause any keyword where the quality score drops below 2. and Google will just regularly go in real time, go through your keywords and pause them automatically. So that is an option you have if you want to take a more hands-off approach with the account. You don't have to be checking them and manually pausing them all the time. I typically didn't do this when I was in an agency just because my job was to optimize the keywords and optimize the account. So a regular optimization was looking at the keyword quality score and seeing where I can improve things. Now, whilst we're on the topic of keywords and keyword quality score, alongside making sure your keyword quality score isn't too low, Google does also want your ads to have a click-through rate above 5% or above every month. So you need to maintain that 5% click-through rate. Now that isn't at keyword level or ad level, that is at account level. So although that may sound high, don't panic because it's your entire account. So if you have campaigns that are delivering a low click-through rate below 5%, but then you have a number of campaigns that are pushing your click-through rate at account level to above 5%, then your account will be fine. It's important to keep an eye on this, look at this every week, I would say, if you can, just because it can be quite easy for that click-through rate to drop below that 5% mark if you're not monitoring things. Gosh, first episode back in a while and I cannot speak. And obviously, if you're optimizing your keyword quality score, like I say, expected click-through rate is something that gets fed into that quality score, and that is based on historical click-through rate data in a lot of instances. So you should be pretty good from a click-through rate perspective. If your ad copy is of a high quality, you're following all best practices, your keywords are relevant to your cause, then you shouldn't have this issue, which is again why it's so important to make sure your keywords you're implementing aren't too broad, not only from the perspective of Google doesn't like that, but also from a perspective that you can maintain a decent click-through rate without having to do too much work. So now we're going to talk back into the account setup side of things. And the next one I'm going to talk about is around the ad group setup. Since we're still talking about keywords and keyword implementation, we might as well continue talking about the campaign build, and then we'll talk about the account setup as well. So when it comes to the account structure, you need to have at least 2 ads per ad group and at least 2 ads per campaign. Or 2 ad groups per campaign. So what does that mean? So obviously when it comes to your Google Ads campaigns, you have what's called ad groups, and those ad groups sit within those campaigns. And then within those ad groups is where you implement your keywords as well as your ads. So each campaign you have in your account, you need at least 2 ad groups within these campaigns. And these ad groups need to be highly relevant or contain keywords that are, of course, highly relevant to your ads, as well as your landing pages. And then within these ad groups, you need at least 2 ads. Now, within Google Ads accounts, you have responsive search ads, and responsive search ads are where you can implement a number of headlines and descriptions. And what Google will do is they will circulate between the headlines and descriptions implemented to deliver the variations/combinations that users are more likely to click on. So the more headlines and description variations you can kind of have, the more you give Google to learn from. It's just important to make sure that they are relevant to your charity/organization. And alongside that, you need at least 2 site link ad extensions. So in case you're not sure what site link ad extensions are essentially an additional part of your ad that gives users more information about your organization. And extensions they come under a various different names. So you've got site link extensions, which we're talking about now. You've got call out extensions, you've got structured snippets, image extensions and price extensions, although do you have those in charity accounts? I can't remember. So yeah, you just have different opportunities to provide users with more context about your business. And site link extensions are essentially an extension whereby users can click to an alternative part of your website that your ad isn't already going to. So you might see it in a lot of ads where you've got the main ad, which is say taking users to the homepage. And then you've got snippets of text underneath that say take users to contact us, more information pages, a meet the team page, our locations pages, stuff like that. Those are site link extensions. And you need at least 2 of those in order to not only follow Google's criteria, but site link extensions also can help improve click-through rate and that all-important keyword quality score. So the funny thing about all of these policies is if you follow all of these structure policies that Google are putting into place, they kind of all feed into one another. So once you've ticked one box, providing you're regularly optimizing the account, you are kind of ticking all the boxes anyway, which is all kind of Google wants, is just making sure you're ticking all the boxes. Finally, when it comes to account setup, you need to have valid conversion tracking, which essentially means that the account needs to have conversion tracking and you have at least recorded one conversion per month. So you don't have to have a really high conversion rate or anything like that. Your conversion tracking just needs to be working and is valid. So what that means is you need to be tracking towards stuff, whether that is form submissions, phone calls, donations, email contacts. And a lot of charity accounts I worked on, they optimized towards time on site. So they had conversion actions imported from Google Analytics that were based on the number of page views that a user had. So let's say they viewed more than 5 pages on the website within a single session, or time on site. So they went onto the page and stayed on there for over 2 minutes or something. They optimized towards that. One thing to keep in mind is if the conversion number is too inflated and too high, Google will pull you up on that. So it's important to make sure you're not just tracking for everything and anything to where Google's going to think they're not valid or legitimate conversions, which is why things like optimizing towards time on site was a big one, because it meant you can optimize towards quality users and get those important kind of conversion numbers within the account for Google to say, okay, this account is legitimate without overinflating the numbers to where Google would flag you as kind of like a spammy account. So things like if you're optimizing towards site traffic, one thing you could do is if you're seeing too many conversions pull through based on users to the site, you can increase the amount of time the criteria for the amount of time your users visited your site for, or the number of pages or screens they visited when they visited your site. Or you could just optimize towards things like form submissions, donations, stuff like that, which is ultimately what you want from your campaigns, I'd imagine anyway. And last but not least, when it comes to off-account stuff, so optimizations aside, account build aside, Google does send a program survey, which grant account users have to complete. Normal account users, they don't have to complete these. They can, and they get given things like ad credits and whatnot. But grants accounts will get an account survey every year, and they'll get a notification for this, and they have to complete it. And it's very important you do so in order to maintain your grant account status. Now, when it comes to the setup of grants accounts, a common thing I've seen go wrong within grant accounts is the setup process. And this is essentially because they don't follow the instructions properly from Google. So let's say you are trying to set up a grants account and you get in contact with Google, you submit an application form for a grants account. Google will then, once it's kind of reviewed all of the information you've provided, they will send you an email, and in that email, it will tell you what your grants account number is, and it will allow you, I believe, to log in to the grants account via that email itself. Now, it's so important, and I can't say this enough, it is so important to follow the instructions of Google's email to a T, even making sure when you log in to your grants account that you are logging in to the grants account number, the ad account number that is associated with the email Google sends you. So really make sure you are cross-referencing the two together. If you are really unsure, you can contact Google to make sure that you've got it right, because if you do not log into the correct grants account, you will risk spending ad spend that Google is not going to cover. If you spend any ad spend in an account that isn't what Google sent you, Google will not cover it, even if you contact them afterwards, prove that, they gave you a grants account and all of that. They're not going to refund you anything. You're going to have to cover those costs. And that is something that I've seen people do wrong on more occasions than I would like. It's not super often, but it is something that happens. Another way to ensure you're in the right account, if you don't have the chance to contact Google directly or they're not very helpful, is you shouldn't need to enter any billing information if it is a grants account, because Google is paying for it. So you shouldn't need to enter credit card details or anything like that. If you are required to do that, you're likely in the wrong account. So please do not run any advertising in an account or quote unquote grants account where you have to put billing information in because it's likely not legitimate. So that's another quite easy way to check and make sure you are in the correct account, because some people then add billing information in and then it goes to no longer being a grants account. So please do not enter billing information. If you're in what you believe to be your grants account and it's still asking for billing information and you genuinely think it is your grants account, you can contact Google. But generally speaking, you shouldn't have to. Also, don't panic about overspending the $10,000 and then having to pay Google back. Google has rules in place whereby it cannot go over $357 a day or something like that, $300 something a day. So Google will have this under control. Google does also put bid caps of $2 per keyword on Google Grants accounts as well. So it prevents you from overspending within an account. You can also use automated bidding, and I would still recommend using automated bidding within a Google Grants account just to make sure you're leaning on Google's automated bidding solutions, especially because you're going to have a bid cap anyway. So manual CPC is not going to get you anywhere if you're trying to play a game of bidding high for keywords to end up at the top of the search page, because you're going to have a bid cap. So I would recommend using Google Ads, max conversions, or target CPA bidding, or anything along the conversion generation route, just to ensure you are optimizing towards the most meaningful actions on your website. If you don't really care about conversions, which I feel like most people do, you can look at alternative bidding solutions like Max Clicks, but I would always go the conversion orientated route just to make sure I'm optimizing towards what the client essentially wants. But yes, that is that episode all about Google Grants accounts and the criteria you need to follow, the optimizations you would need to do to make sure you're adhering to that criteria, and easy mistakes that advertisers make, which can be quite costly within a grants account. So yes, I hope that was helpful and I wish you good luck in your Google Grants journey if you are listening. And thank you for listening. I will speak to you again soon.